There are 5 questions you must never answer. And the people asking them cannot be trusted. These aren't complicated questions. They're not interrogations. They're not obvious traps with flashing warning signs. They're the opposite. They're soft. They're warm. They sound like someone who cares about you, someone who respects you, someone who just wants to talk. And that's what makes them lethal. Because the most dangerous questions in the world don't sound dangerous. They sound like friendship. They sound like honesty. They sound like trust. And by the time you realize what they actually were, you've already given something away that you can never take back. Machiavelli spent his life watching people destroy themselves. Not in battles, but in conversations. A single wrong answer at the wrong table cost someone their alliances, their reputation, or their power. And he noticed something that most people still haven't figured out 5 centuries later. The people who fall aren't the ones who get attacked openly. They're the ones who get asked the right question at the right moment by the right person and they answer fully honestly because it felt safe. I'm going to show you all 5 questions and the 5th one is the root. The one that makes the other 4 possible. If you can learn to never answer that one question, the other 4 lose most of their power over you. But you need to see the first 4 to understand why the 5th one is the one that matters most. Now, before we go into these 5 questions, I want to be clear about something. This is not about becoming paranoid. This is not about assuming everyone around you is a threat. This is about protection. Understanding which questions are safe to answer and which ones are designed to take something from you that you didn't mean to give. That's not distrust. That's intelligence. Here's what most people don't realize. You were trained from childhood to answer every question that comes your way. A teacher asks, you answer. A parent asks, you answer. An authority figure asks, you comply. That training made you obedient. It didn't make you powerful. Power starts the moment you realize that not every question deserves your truth. That the space between someone asking and you answering is the most important moment in any conversation. In that space, you either keep your power or hand it over. Right now, that space doesn't exist for you. By the end of this video, it will and it will never go away. Let's get into it. You don't mind, right? The permission trap. The first question you must never answer. And this one happens to you constantly at work, at home, with friends, with family. You'll recognize it the moment I say it. Someone does something that affects you. They make a decision without asking. They cross a boundary. They commit to something on your behalf. They change the plan. They give away your time. And after it's already done, after the action is already taken, they look at you and ask, you don't mind, right? Or that's okay with you, isn't it? Or you're fine with that, right? Stop. Listen to what just happened. They're not asking your permission. They already acted. The decision is made. The thing is done. That question is not a question. It's a notification dressed as a request. And the way it's worded traps you into agreeing because the expected answer is no. I don't mind. Anything else, anything that sounds like actually I do mind makes you look difficult, petty, unreasonable. The question has been engineered so that disagreement costs you socially. And most people will absorb the violation and say it's fine rather than pay that cost. The person asking knows this. That's exactly why they did the thing first and asked the question second. Think about how many times this has happened to you. Someone gave away your Saturday without asking and then said you don't mind helping out, right? Someone shared something private about you and then said you're not upset about that, are you? Someone took credit for your work and then said, we're a team, so it doesn't matter who gets the credit, right? Someone volunteered your time, your money, your energy, your name, and then checked in afterward with a question that made saying no feel like starting a war. Watch what happens when you answer this question with it's fine. You think you're being easygoing. You think you're keeping the peace, but the person who asked just learned something about you. They learn that they can act first and get your approval afterward, and they will do it again. And the next time the violation will be a little bigger, a little more invasive, a little more costly. Because every time you sign off on something you didn't choose, you raise the limit on what they think they can take without asking. Machiavelli wrote that men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand because everyone can see but few can touch. What he understood is that appearances matter more than reality. And he questioned you don't mind creates the appearance of consent. It makes it look like you agreed. It makes it look like you were consulted. And if you ever bring it up later, they'll say, but you said you were fine with it. The question didn't just get your compliance. It got your signature on a contract you never read. So when someone hits you with "you don't mind," you don't nod. You don't say "it's fine." You say, "Actually, I would have preferred if you'd asked me first, or I would have handled that differently." You don't need to be angry. You don't need to make a scene. You just don't say yes when everything in the dynamic is pressuring you to say yes. And the moment you stop automatically signing off on things you didn't choose, something shifts. People stop informing you, they start consulting you. That shift from someone people act on to someone people check with changes your entire position. And it starts with refusing to answer one question. That's the first question you must never answer. The retroactive permission trap. Can I be honest with you? The setup. But the second question is harder to spot because it doesn't come after a violation. It comes before one. It arrives disguised as something a good friend would say. Something that sounds like courage, like respect. And because of that disguise, you open the door every single time. What is it? The second question you must never answer. And this one is dangerous because it makes you feel like saying no makes you weak. Someone looks at you and says, "Can I be honest with you?" And you say, "Of course," every time. Every single time. Because what kind of person says no to honesty? What kind of person refuses truth? So you say yes. And in that moment, you've given someone permission to say whatever they want while framing it as a gift they're giving you. Think about the last time someone said, "Can I be honest with you?" What followed? Was it something that lifted you up? Was it something that expanded your thinking? Or was it something that planted a seed of doubt? Something that made you second-guess yourself? "I don't think this is going to work. I don't think you're ready. I'm not sure you're making the right choice." And because they asked permission first because they called it honesty, you're not allowed to be upset. They were just being honest. They were just trying to help. But watch the pattern across your life. The person who says, "Can I be honest with you?" almost never follows it with something that builds your confidence. They follow it with criticism, with doubt, with something that slows you down. And they get to do all of this while standing behind the shield of the word honest. You can't attack honesty. You can't be angry at someone who was just telling the truth. Except they weren't telling truth. They were telling their perspective and they weaponized one word to make that perspective unchallengeable. Now think about the people who actually care about you. The ones who genuinely have your back. When they have something difficult to say, do they ask permission first? No. They just say it because real honesty doesn't need a runway. Real honesty doesn't need you to lower your defenses before it arrives. The people who ask, "Can I be honest with you?" are asking because they know what they're about to say won't feel like care. And they need your agreement to receive it before you hear it. Because if they just said it cold, you'd recognize it for what it is. The preamble is the disguise. Remove the disguise and the thing underneath is naked. Machiavelli understood that the greatest manipulations are the ones disguised as virtue. When someone wraps their strike in the language of honesty or courage or care, you can't fight back without looking like the problem. You become the person who can't handle truth, the sensitive one, and they become the brave friend who was just looking out for you. The frame is rigged before the conversation starts. Watch what happens when you stop accepting the premise. Someone asks, "Can I be honest with you?" Instead of saying, "Of course," you say, "Depends on what it's about." Or you say, "You can say whatever you want. I'll decide what I do with it." Most people stutter. They hesitate. They backtrack. Because the whole strategy was built on you saying yes automatically. The moment you don't, the shield drops. They have to say the thing without the armor of honesty protecting them. And suddenly, it sounds a lot less like truth and a lot more like what it always was, an opinion they wanted to deliver without consequences. That's the second question. The honesty disguise. 2 questions down, 2 traps recognized. You're already seeing conversations differently than most people ever will. Most people go their whole lives absorbing these 2 questions without ever recognizing the mechanism. You see it now. And that changes how people interact with you from this point forward. But the third what woo? LD you do if you were me. The transfer question operates in completely different territory. The first 2 took something from you in the moment. The third one makes you carry something that isn't yours, something heavy, and the weight follows you for months, sometimes years, without you realizing you picked it up voluntarily. What is it? The third question you must never answer. And this one is the most flattering trap of all 5 because it makes you feel important right before it makes you responsible. Somebody asks you, "What would you do if you were me, a friend, a colleague, a family member?" They lay out their situation, a problem, a crossroads, a decision they can't make, and then they look at you with that expression that says, "I trust your judgment more than my own. What would you do?" And you answer, "Of course." You answer because it feels good to be the one someone turns to, because it feels like respect. So, you weigh the options. You think about it carefully and you give them your honest recommendation. But here's what actually happened. That person had a decision to make. A decision with real consequences. And instead of carrying the full weight of that decision on their own shoulders, they transferred part of it to yours. Because now, if they follow your advice and it works, who gets the credit? They do. They made the right call. Your name disappears. But if they follow your advice and it fails, who gets the blame? You. You told them to do it. They remember your exact words. They replay the conversation and they hold you responsible for a decision that was never yours to make. Think about a time you gave someone advice and it didn't work out the way you said it would. Did they own the decision, or did they come back to you with "You told me to do this"? You said this was the right move. Maybe they didn't say it out loud, but you felt it. The weight of a choice that wasn't yours to make landed on you anyway because you put your fingerprints on someone else's decision, and fingerprints are evidence. And sometimes the person asking isn't confused at all. They've already decided. They already know what they want to do. But they want someone else's name attached to the decision in case it collapses. A backup, a fall guy. And by answering, "What would you do if you were me?" you volunteer for that role without knowing you auditioned. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must always take counsel, but only when he wishes, not when others wish. What he understood is that giving guidance on someone else's terms puts you at their mercy. The moment you prescribe a path for another person's life, you inherit the consequences of that path without any of the control. So when someone asks, "What would you do if you were me?" you don't give them the answer. You give them something better. You ask, "What are you leaning toward?" You say, "It sounds like you already know what you want to do." You put the decision back in their hands without touching it. You can listen. You can support. You can ask questions that help them think, but you never put your name on a choice that someone else has to live with. Let people own their own decisions. Your recommendations about other people's lives stay safest in the only place nobody can hold them against you, inside your head. That's the third question, the decision transfer. 3 questions: compliance, honesty, decisions, all protected now. But the "who told you that?" The hunt, 4th question, shifts into darker territory. The first 3 were about what people take from you. Your agreement, your guard, your name. The 4th takes something from someone who isn't even in the room, and you become the weapon without knowing you were loaded. What is it? The 4th question you must never answer. And this one should make you angry when you realize how many times it's been used on you. You confront someone. You bring up something you heard, something you saw, something you know, maybe a lie they told. Maybe a move they made behind your back. Maybe information that proves they aren't who they claim to be. And instead of addressing what you just said, instead of dealing with the substance of what you brought to the table, they look at you and ask who told you that. And the entire conversation pivots. Suddenly, you're not talking about what they did. You're talking about how you found out. They've redirected the entire confrontation away from their behavior and aimed it at your source. And if you answer, if you give them a name, you've done 2 catastrophic things at once. You've betrayed the person who trusted you with that information. And you've given the person you're confronting a target, someone to punish, someone to discredit, someone to cut off, so the flow of truth stops and they can go back to operating in the dark. Think about every time someone has deflected your confrontation with "who told you that?" Did the conversation ever return to the original issue? Almost. Never, because the redirect worked. You got pulled into defending your source, explaining how you found out, justifying why you were even looking into it. And the whole time, the person who actually did the thing sat back and watched you scramble. They turned your confrontation into your problem with 4 words, and you helped them do it by answering. Watch what happens when you give up the name. The person you were confronting now has a new mission. Not to address what they did, to eliminate whoever exposed it. They go after your source. They cut them off. They discredit them. They make sure nobody tells you anything ever again. And the next time they do something behind your back, you won't hear about it. Because the one person who would have told you has been burned by you because you answered a question that was never about truth. It was about control. It was about shutting down the only eyes and ears you had. Machiavelli wrote that the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. What he understood is that the people who bring you truth are rare. They are valuable. They're assets. And the question who told you that exists for one purpose: to identify and eliminate those assets so that you go blind again. Answering it doesn't make you honest. It makes you a liability to every person who ever cared enough to tell you what was really going on. So when someone asks, "Who told you that?" you never give a name. Never. You bring it back to the substance. It doesn't matter how I found out. What matters is whether it's true or that's not the conversation we're having. The source stays protected, and the person who tried to redirect has nowhere to go except back to the thing they were running from. Let them sit in that. Let them deal with what they did instead of hunting the person who saw it. That's the fourth question. The source hunt. For questions sealed. Compliance, honesty, decisions, sources, all protected. And every one of them operates differently. Everyone uses a different mechanism to extract something you shouldn't have given. But I told you at the beginning that the fifth question is the root. The one that makes all four of the others possible. Here it is. The one that, if you learn to never answer, changes everything, because this question doesn't take your compliance or your guard or your name or your source. It does something worse. It disarms you completely. It kills the pause. It destroys the space between the question and the answer that protects you from every other trap, and you hand it over instantly because refusing feels like a "you trust me, right?" The final check. Crime. The fifth question you must never answer. The master question, the root of all the others. Someone looks at you and says, "You trust me, right?" And everything in your body wants to say yes. Because saying no feels like an accusation. Saying no feels like you're calling them a liar. Saying no feels like you're the problem, the suspicious one, the person damaging the relationship by not giving them this one simple word they're asking for. So you say it, "Of course I trust you." And the gates open, all of them at once. Because once you've said those words, you've locked yourself into a position where questioning anything they do next makes you the hypocrite. You said you trusted them. So when they do something without asking and say you don't mind, right? You can't push back. You trusted them. When they say, "Can I be honest with you?" and tear you apart, you have to stand there and take it. You trusted them. When they ask what you would do in their situation and blame you when it fails, you can't object. You trusted them. When they get caught and demand to know who told you, you feel the pull to answer because you trusted them. That one word, that one yes. It became a blank check, and they fill in the amount every single time. And the amount is always more than you intended to give. Think about someone in your life who has asked you this. "You trust me, right?" Think about what happened in the weeks and months after you said yes. Did their behavior earn that trust? Or did they use your declaration as a shield? Every time their actions fell short, "I thought you trusted me. You said you trusted me. Why are you questioning me if you trust me?" Your own words became the chain they wrapped around you. Every time you tried to see clearly, every time you tried to apply that pause, every time something felt wrong and you wanted to question it, you couldn't because you'd already committed to not questioning. With one word. Here's what nobody tells you. The people who have genuinely earned your trust never ask for it. They don't need to. Their behavior already built it. Trust that's real doesn't need a declaration. It exists in what someone does consistently over years. Not in what someone asks you to say in a single moment. The question "You trust me, right?" is only asked by people who need the W. Odds because their actions haven't been enough. They need you to say it because they can't show it. And the moment you say it, you've given them immunity, a shield they hold up every single time their behavior doesn't match what they promised. And here's why this is the master question. Why did you absorb the violation instead of pushing back? Because you trusted them. Why did you lower your guard when they asked to be honest? Because you trusted them. Why did you carry the weight of their decision? Because you trusted them. Why did you give up the name of someone who told you the truth? Because you trusted them. Every question in this video, every single trap works because of this one. The first four are the arms. This is the heart. Kill the heart and the arms go limp. Stop declaring trust on demand. And every other trap in this video loses its primary mechanism. Machiavelli wrote that he who deceives will always find those who allow themselves to be deceived. And the question, "You trust me, right?" is the mechanism of that allowance. It's the moment you lower every wall voluntarily. Not because the person proved anything, but because they asked in a tone that made refusing feel cruel. The fox doesn't force the gate, he asks you to open it, and you do. So when someone asks you, "Trust me, right?" you don't say, "Yes," And you don't say no. You say, I pay attention to what people do. That's it. Short, clean, true. Or you say actions show me that, not words. You remove the binary. You refuse to hand over the blank check and watch the reaction. The person who deserves your trust will respect that answer. They'll nod. They'll move on. They don't need the words because their life already speaks. But the person who needed that yes, the person whose next move depended on you saying it, they'll press. They'll push. They'll get uncomfortable. And in that pressure, in that insistence, you'll see exactly why they needed the declaration. Because the behavior was never going to hold up on its own. 5 questions. You don't mind, right? Retroactive compliance. Can I be honest with you? Permission to strike. What would you do if you were me? Decision transfer. Who told you that? Source elimination. You trust me, right? Blank check immunity. The master question. The root of the other 4. Now look at your life with these 5 questions in mind. Who around you keeps acting first and asking later because they've learned you'll always say it's fine? Who uses the word honest right before they plant doubt in your head? Who keeps coming to you for advice, but somehow it's your fault when things don't work out? Who deflected the last time you confronted them by asking how you found out instead of addressing what they did? And who in your life keeps asking you to trust them with words because they haven't been able to show you with actions? Answer those honestly because the answers will show you exactly who's been using these questions on you and how long it's been working. These 5 questions happen every day at work, at home, over dinner, over text, from people you care about, from people you barely know. And until right now, you answered every one of them automatically without pausing. You signed off on things you never chose. You opened the door because someone called their opinion honesty. You put your name on someone else's decision. You burned a source because the pressure was louder than your judgment. And you handed out blank checks of trust to people whose actions should have been enough if the trust was real. All 5 running on you constantly. And you never felt it happening. That's how smooth these questions are. That's how invisible the extraction is. It feels like talking, like connecting, like being a good person. And it is. It's just not a protected person. But now you hear it. Now when someone says you don't mind, right? You feel the manufactured consent forming and you don't sign. Now when someone says, can I be honest? You hear the setup before the strike. Now when someone asks what would you do? You feel the weight moving toward your shoulders and you let it pass. Now when someone asks who told you, you hear the redirect and you hold the original frame. And now when someone says you trust me, right, you feel the blank check sliding across the table and you don't pick up the pen. You hear all 5 now and you can't unhear them. This is not about suspecting everyone. Some people in your life are safe. Some people prove that through years of consistent action, not through asking for your trust in a conversation. This is about becoming intentional. Choosing what you give instead of giving everything by default. The difference between someone who gets maneuvered in every conversation and someone who can't be moved is not intelligence. It's not experience. It's that pause, that one beat of silence between the question and the answer where you stop reacting and start choosing. Build that pause starting today. Next time someone asks one of these 5 questions, don't answer on reflex. Let a beat pass. Feel what the question is pulling from you and then decide. Give them something if they've earned it. Give them nothing if they haven't. But make it a choice, not a habit. Because the difference between someone who is constantly readable and someone people can't outmaneuver is not personality, it's discipline. And that discipline starts in the silence between the question and the answer. In the coming weeks, something is going to shift. And you'll feel it in real time. Conversations will feel different. Not tense, not guarded, just clearer. You'll notice the moment someone asks for retroactive permission instead of real permission. You'll catch the word honest being loaded before a strike. You'll feel the weight of someone's decision sliding toward you, and you'll sidestep it. You'll hold your sources when someone tries to redirect a confrontation, and you'll sit calmly when someone asks for trust they haven't built. And the people around you will sense it. They won't be able to name it. You won't seem cold. You won't seem distant. But something about you will feel different, more solid, harder to move. Like someone who doesn't get pushed into corners anymore, like someone whose yes actually means something because it stopped being automatic. People treat you differently when they realize you can't be answered into compliance. When they realize your silence is a choice and your agreement has to be earned, that shift changes everything. Not because you demanded respect, because you stopped giving it away for free. One question at a time. Machiavelli spent his life watching power move between people. And the single clearest pattern he found was this. The people who fall are never the ones who get overpowered. They're the ones who get out, ask the right question from the right person at the right moment, and everything collapses. Not through force, through a conversation that felt safe until it wasn't. 5 centuries later, the questions have changed their clothes, but they haven't changed their function. They still extract. They still disarm. They still position the asker above the answerer. And the only defense that has ever worked is the one you now carry with you. The pause, the space, the ability to hear a question and choose instead of comply. Most people will live their entire lives answering every question that comes their way, nodding when they should hold still, agreeing when they should stay silent, explaining when they should walk away. And they'll wonder why they keep ending up in positions they didn't choose, carrying weight they didn't pick up, defending decisions they didn't make. They'll never trace it back to the conversations. They'll never hear the question behind the question. But you will, because you hear it now. If something shifted in you that doesn't shift back, tell me in the comments. Right. I guard my answers. Let me see how many people here are done being the person who always says yes, always explains, always gives every time someone asks in the right tone. And don't forget to keep watching the next video. It is important, much more than you imagine. See you there.